Hopefully everyone is able to see the PowerPoint. If you are not, please let us know in the comments. Okay, making sure we have everything set up. So this is what we're discussing today, creating a welcoming environment for sign language users and people with hearing loss. So the first question that I have for you all, what does your team talk about when they say access to services? What do you think that you mean when you're saying access to services? This is important because it could be that you're thinking your first thought that may come to mind would be ramps for access to the building, possibly mechanical doors to open automatically on a push of a button. But then oftentimes there are other types of access that are needed that aren't physical to the building. And that's what we're going to focus on some more today. These are some examples of communication access symbols that are commonly used in our community. Many deaf and hard of hearing individuals already know the meanings of these signs. So when you have signage on your front doors, on your information desks, or on your check-in desks, the individuals who come in, when they notice one of these symbols, they'll know that they have access there. So the first symbol on the top left shows that there's a hearing loss. The center on the top line is an interpreter is provided. On the top right, you see CC, that means closed captioning for a television. Many deaf individuals will say, I need CC, but they don't expand what that means. I need CC, but do you know what CC means? It means closed captioning for like a television. The bottom left, this is more of a recent icon that has been added for communication access. This is for video interpreting. It became much more popular and common to see during the pandemic and has stuck around. We call that video remote interpreting, VRI. And then the final bottom right, that would mean that you have a hearing loss and you may use a device to help with your hearing loss, possibly a loop or a telecoil, something like that. So these are tips to make sure that your waiting room is set up to ensure access to everyone. Really, the point of a waiting room, you want your deaf and hard of hearing individuals to feel like they belong there, that they are welcome there. Go ahead and have the captions turned on the television. Don't have to, ask for that. Just have it be an automatic for everyone. Try to make sure that things are very visually accessible in the waiting room. Don't have a whole lot of things blocking sight lines. It's not necessarily the person, like if you have a fire alarm go off, the person needs to be able to see the flashing light from wherever they are sitting in the room and not have to rely on somebody to tell them, hey, the fire alarm's going off, or them to think, why is everybody all of a sudden getting up and leaving? If you have reading materials in your waiting room, do you have reading materials that are relevant to deaf and hard of hearing individuals? Most doctors' offices in their waiting rooms, or even if you go to like a social security office or something, they always have brochures or magazines, health kind of information sitting there. And a lot of it's just generic anyone can read that. But at the same time, there may be some for like older individuals or what have you. It would be the same. Could we get some information for people who are deaf and hard of hearing? There are publications available for specific communities, and one of those communities would be the deaf community. You could certainly Google for those kinds of publications and subscribe to one or two of those and have those available in your waiting room to make it more inviting and welcoming for the deaf and hard of hearing individual. Also, when a person is there and they have to wait to be called to see their provider, it would be great to let them know, okay, we will come and get you when they're calling your name, so that the person knows, okay, it's my turn. Also, if there is an interpreter there, please make sure that the interpreter is, or that the person is told that the interpreter is there and is available. Effective communication before the interpreter arrives, or if there is not an interpreter for the appointment. If there's gonna not be any interpreter, or if the interpreter hasn't yet arrived, you can try to use paper and pencil, or some offices use a whiteboard that they can easily erase. But anything that you're writing, make sure that you keep it kind of simple and to the point. Use that paper or note just for ease of communication. Make sure that it's written clearly and concisely. So if you all know like a basic sign, hello, how are you, at your front desk, try and use it. Deaf people love it when you at least are showing an effort to use their language and communicate directly with you. And then over time, you'll be preparing and improving your own sign language ability because you're using it. And then they'll teach you more. Our deaf culture values eye contact. So if you are having to look away from a deaf person, that is like a disconnect for us. We're like, ooh, what's going on? Why are you looking away? What's important? So please maintain eye contact. Try to be smiling and friendly, of course, and take your time. Use your patience, because deaf and hard of hearing people are more than willing to be patient with us. But if you aren't patient back, then it's just not going to work. Communicating with individuals who have hearing loss but can use speech reading or lip reading. For this is one of the largest challenges that the community faces, especially when we wear masks. Of course, we suggest you not to use masks if you're communicating with a person with hearing loss. And if you do have to wear a mask, make sure it's a clear mask. You can see some of the samples on the screen. Then on the right side of the screen, you can see how some of the words are covered up or blurred out. This would be equivalent to what it would be trying to speak to someone who is only using their lips and speech reading to understand what you're saying. If you're like talking off to the side of someone and not directly facing them, they're not able to see your entire mouth and how it's moving. This is not only those who have hearing loss, but even deaf individuals. If you're talking to them and then you look off to the side to your computer or something, that's very distracting and it disconnects you from the listener. So always, if you're speaking to the person, make sure that you are facing them. That way you're not offending them by looking away and basically cutting off communication with them. If you think that their response to you is not appropriate, then ask the question again. Just repeat what you've said, because it could have been a misunderstanding. If it happens a whole lot, then go ahead and write it down. Try not to be too verbose. Don't just keep talking. Don't try to talk faster or really, really slow, because that changes it on the lips. It doesn't look right. Plus, then again, just try to keep your information very clear, to the point. Don't give them a whole paragraph of information, because it won't be able to be understood as well. If you don't have clear masks, please go ahead and buy some. These are easily available for purchase. And especially if you have a person in your office who is deaf or hard of hearing that comes in, just go ahead and make sure you have some behind the desk and be prepared. There are options for amplification at the front desk. So let's talk more about this. We want to make sure that any amplified devices themselves are available. And these amplification devices allow sound to become louder for the person who's listening to it. So that could be audio amplifiers, which are used to make loudspeakers larger or excuse me, loudspeakers louder or to get to the headphones. And then you have RF power amplifiers. They're used for like a transmission type situation. The accommodation devices should be available at the front desk for anyone to be able to use. And then you have to know which device is best for that person. That person will be able to advise you which one they need. So it's an electronic device which will increase the input of the signal. And there are two different types of the amplifier. There's a 1.2 voltage where it increases the input voltage, and then there's the 2.2 current volt amplifier, which increases the input current. The 2.3 power amplifier increases the input power. So there are three parts to that amplification that we were just discussing. So when you have a client who comes in and has hearing loss and requests amplification, you should be ready at the front desk to pick up whichever system you all have in that office and let the deaf individual or the hard of hearing individual know that this is what you have to offer. Our department can reimburse for purchasing these types of amplification devices. So you can go ahead and research which one would be best for your office, what your clients need. You can purchase them and then submit your invoices to us, and we can then try to reimburse you as soon as possible. So back to lip reading and speech reading. I want to know if you think yes or no. You can answer in the chat, put yes or no. So for the first image, it's at the top right, or excuse me, top left. It's the gentleman with the gray or silver mustache and small goatee. Do you think that would be easier or hard to lip read? Yes or no? You can lip read this person or you cannot. Yes or no? Okay. Oops, I hit the wrong button. There we go. Yes, you can lip read this person, or no, you cannot. Okay, some in the chat are saying no, some are saying yes. The correct answer is no. You cannot lip read these individuals, or especially this first one on the left, because the mustache is over the upper lip and then it actually is covering some of the bottom lip. Not to mention it would be very distracting to have to try to focus on and get any sort of intelligible speech out of that. The second one with the gentleman with the red beard and the curly mustache on the top, do you think that yes, you can or cannot lip read this individual? Again, you can just answer in the chat. Okay, I'm seeing the answers come in. Some are saying yes, you can. One person has said no. So the gentleman with the red beard in the top center image, again, unfortunately, I would say no, he would not be easy to speech read. But I have asked a couple of other individuals with hearing loss who do a lot of speech reading, and they say for him it would depend. It would depend. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. So again, this is something that it relies on the individual and what they're what they are able to lip read. If the person may have a heavier mustache, it could interfere with more of the lip. So it really depends on the individuals. Then on the far right at the top, the third individual presenting as a female with dark lipstick. Do you think this would be easy to read or not? Okay, some are saying no, some are saying yes. This color really is kind of more distracting than it is helpful. It's kind of like the next one on the bottom in the left with the bright red lipstick. It's almost just too bright red. Some people say, no, that's the kind that I want to see. But honestly, for most people, it could be more of a distraction than a help. The fifth and final picture on the bottom right with the thick beard, do you think that he would be easy to lip read or no? Yes or no? Obviously, no. That would not be easy to lip read because you're just seeing the hair. Correct. Correct. So I want to make sure that you all know, because it's assumed that lip reading is easily done, but it can often lead to misunderstandings. Most people who lip read or speech read are only getting 30% of the communication from what they see on the mouth. The 70 to 80% is guesswork. For example, if I'm going to say something, of course, the interpreter's not going to voice what I'm saying. So look at my mouth. What do you think I said? In the chat, you can type what you think I just mouthed to you. One person has said, "How are you?" Okay. Anybody else? Another person has said, "I want to marry you." Okay. Other person's response was, "I want to marry you." Okay. Any other responses or guesses as to what I mouthed? Hi, how are you? Okay. Any others? Just making sure. I know two people answered correctly. I want to marry you is what I mouthed. I want to marry you. So see how some people easily misunderstood just thinking, how are you? And it's just because the mouth moves differently. And if you don't have the sound coming out, it's harder to guess what is on the lips. So typically that can lead to confusion, misunderstanding during a conversation. There's no one who is an expert at speech reading, even though some people will say they are. There may be a few who are very talented at it, but not the average everyday person is able to get most of the communication through speech reading. So if you have contracted with an interpreter, once the interpreter arrives on site, the front desk has the responsibility to, welcome the interpreter, let the interpreter know where the restroom is, let them know where they may be able to sit. The interpreter may want to sit in a different waiting room or even just in the hallway out of the waiting room. So if you could give those options to the interpreter of where they could wait. And I'm going to emphasize giving the option to the interpreter because depending on the situation, they would know what would be best. A different waiting room would be like ideal if you could, but maybe you don't have multiple waiting rooms. Maybe you just have one. Like I just recently mentioned, giving options to the interpreter could choose the hall. But again, if the interpreter is fully scheduled back to back and has appointments before and after your appointment, when they show up, sometimes they need just a moment to kind of recalibrate and get ready for this next mental health appointment. So if it's been like a rush day, back to back appointments from office to office, or if even prior to the appointment they are there for you with, it could have been very complex. It could have been also sensitive. It could have been like a sticky situation or something. And the interpreter just needs a little bit of time to kind of recalibrate, take a couple of deep breaths maybe, and get ready for the appointment that they are there for. So that's why we emphasize if you can give the interpreter the option of where they can wait outside of the main waiting room. Another option is also dependent on the interpreter and the social worker that you're meeting with, the therapist. They need to know any updates from the past meeting, or if there's any new changes that they may need to be mindful of. If there is a change in the interpreter's schedule or provider schedule, like running behind or anything, let them know. If there are any safety issues going on in the building, if there's been a crisis or something, let the interpreter know so that they're not put into a dangerous situation. There has been a time when an interpreter walked into a building and they said, okay, I'm checking in, and they sat down. And then they start seeing other people in the waiting room. Okay, that's fine. And this person's just looking, staring right at me. But I'm like, okay, well, the front desk didn't tell me anything. But then the person next to us said, just, hey, let you know, you may want to scoot over a little bit because this person, who's kind of staring at you can be a little dangerous sometimes. So you may want to go ahead and move over. And then I wanted to see if they let the deaf person know. Because if the person comes in and says, I have an appointment, does that information get, shared on? It's a safety issue. If you need to be, seated in a location that's away from a person who could be dangerous or volatile or, what have you, that kind of information needs to be shared. Hey, you may want to sit on this side, or you may want to, go stand over there or whatever. Don't just tell the deaf person or the interpreter, make sure you tell them both. The last point, there are several places we go that have locked doors. Please let the interpreter know where they can get a key to be able to use the door to have free access for whatever reason, to be able that they can get out or in. So please make sure that the interpreter is aware of how to get access. These are some comic strips that are actually for our community. And this is how we're showing that it is our responsibility to make sure that effective communication occurs for the individuals who we support with our services. So in the first comic on top, you can see that a father is in a doctor's office with their son, and they have an interpreter. So you have a deaf parent with a hearing child and a hearing doctor, and they're saying, oh, do you need a shot? And the doctor's like, oh yes, you need one. But then the son is like, no, stop, don't do it. And then the son speaks up and says, no, don't give me a shot, I don't need the shot. this child should not be making that decision. It's the parent's responsibility. This actually has happened to me several times. I have 3 children of my own, and they try to fool me and pull one over at the doctor's offices. So this is a very familiar situation where the kids try to fool us. The second comic strip on the bottom, again, this is related to lip reading, and this is usually how it goes. I mean, almost every deaf person has had this experience where you meet a hearing person and, you know, they're saying, oh, I forgot to get an interpreter. Well, can you go ahead and, you know, can we go ahead? Let me just warn you, most of our pet peeves in the deaf community are people who say, oh, hey, yeah, well, can you read lips? But then you assume by even asking us, can we read lips, that we can read lips. That's why you're asking us. You should always ask a person, what is your communication preference? Not assume that speech reading is the go-to. Give them the opportunity to tell you what communication access they need and then request that communication access. Some individuals will say, I'm fine with speech reading and lip reading, and that would be fine for them. They can advocate that for themselves. If they were to miss information, they may ask for repetition or ask questions based on the information they think that they're seeing. If that's what they want for their appointment, that is fine for them. But as this picture shows, or this comic strip at the bottom shows, so the individual hearing person says, can you read lips? Then the deaf person has to say, should I say yes? This is what it's going to look like. Everything's going to be garbled. It's going to be all over each other. What is going on? I've kind of lost it. And then, you know, the end result is not going to be effective at all. So if they say no, then the person just is like, oh, give up and go away. So again, it's our responsibility to provide access to communication for our services. And I just want to emphasize, ask for the individual's preference, what they want. It is possible that they could say, I want a specific interpreter. It could be, yes, I do want to speech read. Some will say, oh, I need a tactile interpreter, you know, hand over hand so that I can feel what they're saying. Some people are saying, oh, text messaging, we can just type back and forth on my phone. Some people want paper and pencil. It depends. Just follow what they request for their communication access. So when you make calls to remind individuals about their upcoming appointments, I know a lot of places are doing that now. If you're allowed, try to use an email or a text reminder. Make sure the information in the email or confirmation is that you have already acquired an interpreter, that you have an interpreter assigned for this appointment. That way the deaf person knows, okay, I'll have communication. But then also, if you already have it, please give the interpreter's name, because deaf people need to know who the interpreter is. Like, who are they expecting to see for this information? You know, often what deaf individuals do will have to call the agency themselves is, who have you guys scheduled for such and such appointment at such and such a place? You know, that's not really the deaf person's, you know, responsibility to do that. But at the same time, if there's a conflict and they see this interpreter's name in the confirmation, they have opportunity to call you and say, oh, this is not an appropriate interpreter for my appointment. Please get a different interpreter. So we do emphasize that when you confirm that you have an appointment, please let them know, yes, we have an interpreter scheduled. And then if you have the name of the interpreter, go ahead and include that. You could also even give them, this is the interpreter agency that we use if they want. And then when you're ready to send a reminder to the individual, they have that information so that they can also follow up. But again, this is just information that you can give to your deaf clients, and they're reminders for appointments that will help ease any sort of wariness about, am I going to have communication when I show up for my appointment? And it's a double benefit for you, because then you're just making sure that you've got all your ducks in a row before the client calls you out about it. So it's kind of a nice check and balance for you. I'm not sure if you all have already had experience of telephone calls with deaf and hard of hearing individuals in the past, but I'll go ahead and explain this graphic. You can see the concept on the screen is similar to what we are doing right now for this training. You are hearing a voice from my signs. So with this picture, this is what it would look like for a telephone instead of a Zoom meeting. Deaf people have a camera and a television screen usually in front of them, and it's a video phone provided by Video Relay Services. It is a free service to deaf and hard of hearing individuals provided by the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. They have different agencies, relay services, that provide these services, and the deaf person can receive a video phone from one of these companies to make phone calls to hearing individuals in the community. So these individuals, deaf individuals, type up on their screen, they want to make a phone call. It goes to a call center where there's a hearing interpreter that sees the deaf individual sign on the screen, and then the hearing individual interpreter will call the recipient who does not sign. If you have a deaf client, the number that they give you is something that you can call directly. When you call that number directly, the interpreter will automatically pick up the call and connect you to the deaf person who you are trying to reach. If they're not available, there is the option to leave a sign message. So I've already explained some of this about how deaf individuals use video phones and the video relay service as part of their everyday life to communicate with the outside world. But still, a lot of hearing individuals don't know about video relay service or how to use it. And some people think, oh, okay, this is part of a fraud or a scam, and it's not. This is how deaf individuals are able to make phone calls to non-deaf individuals. It's just to facilitate communication. The interpreter is not trying to scam you. They are just interpreting what is being said between you and the deaf caller. Just, speak as you normally would when you're on the call. Be direct to the deaf individual, not through the interpreter. Don't say, tell him, tell her, or, okay, I'm hearing a female voice, so it must be I'm talking to a female. Tell her, tell her. Don't do things like that. That is another one of our pet peeves in the community as well. Just speak directly to us. We know the interpreter is there, but you're not speaking to the interpreter, you're speaking through the interpreter to us. So regardless of if the interpreter is male or female, don't use the pronouns that may misgender or pronoun the person you're speaking to. Just speak directly to the individual who you are calling, not to the interpreter. Also, we want to emphasize that the deaf individual who's making the phone call will determine whether or not the interpreter announces that it is an interpreted call or not. I would say most of the time, when deaf individuals call, they get lots of hang-ups because people think it's a telemarketer. They think it may be a scam because they hear this is so-and-so from Relay with the number da. So then some deaf individuals saying, do not announce that this is a interpreted call. So please, when you get these types of calls, give it just a minute or two, get some information. If the deaf individual decides not to announce that there's an interpreter, relaying information, you will be able to tell after you get some of the information going in the conversation that it is an interpreted call. These numbers are only given to deaf and hard of hearing individuals specifically from the FCC so that they can use it on their video phones. These are not regular telephone numbers. So if you're speaking to a person with hearing loss on the phone, not a person who's using a video phone, again, just speak directly to the individual. Make sure that you're speaking into the receiver. Don't try to hold it under your chin or above or anywhere. Make sure you're speaking directly into the receiver. Speak naturally at a moderate pace. Don't try to go faster or slower. Try to make sure that you're in the right place to make a call, a quiet place so that there's not a whole lot of background noise. And then try to modulate your volume. You may need to be a little louder or a little softer. It's very important that you plan ahead when you have deaf and hard of hearing clients, because you have a third person in there that you have to depend on and make sure the scheduling works correctly. So as soon as you know you have an appointment and you have the time, go ahead and set up the interpreter or the captioning service, whichever is needed. Go ahead and call them as soon as you can. Right now, it takes 3 to 5 weeks, sometimes 6 weeks, to get an interpreter scheduled. That will give them the time that is necessary to find, one, an interpreter that's available, but also an interpreter that's appropriate for your client and the setting where they are. A lot of clients do have a preferred list of interpreters. If there's only 10 interpreters available, but then this person only wants 2 of them, it makes it a little harder, and the agency can try to call all 10 of the interpreters, but it may not work out that any of them are available. So make sure that you allow the time for that process to happen. When you are contacting your interpreter agency to make a request for an interpreter, call or email your request in. Always tell them who's requesting the service. It would be you or whomever you're making it for. Give them the date, the start time of the appointment, and the end time of the appointment. Who is going to be involved? Who are the not only just the deaf person, but who is the hearing service provider? What service is needed? Are you needing an interpreter? Are you needing someone who uses more ASL, someone who uses more English-like? You may know that about your deaf client, so please inform the agency. But then also make sure that you're describing the appointment. The interpreter needs to know what kind of appointment they're showing up to. What are you needing the interpreter for? We're not just saying, oh, it's a follow-up. And then the interpreter show up and it's like, oh, I thought this was just like a routine, ordinary follow-up. But then it becomes more of a, oh my gosh, this is very heavy. I wish I had known this. I would not have taken this assignment. This is, triggering for me. A lot of interpreters need to know what's going on before they arrive for the assignment so that they are mentally and physically prepared themselves for what's about to, go on in the session. The last piece of information you need to provide, let them know where the appointment is going to take place or if it's going to be virtual. These are the same tips that I would give for captioning as well. It's the same as what I just said for interpreters. Again, make sure that you're providing the necessary information. Call and email the request, who is requesting it, the date, the start and end times, who are the participants involved, the names and spellings are important, what kind of services needed would be CART, a description of what the appointment is going to be about, and then the location or if it's virtual. So quiz time in the chat. I guess actually go ahead and turn your cameras on so that we can all see each other. Now would be the time to show all of our faces again. Okay. So the first question, lip reading is the easiest way for a deaf person to communicate with a hearing person. True or false? All false. Correct. You were all correct. Correct. Next question. Paperwork to fill out or signature processes, that's okay without an interpreter. Is that true or false? To do paperwork and signatures without an interpreter. Why? Anybody want to expand on why? Okay. All right. Great. Yes. You all are correct in your responses here. Yes. Perfect. Great answers, all of them. Thank you. I would just add to this also the warning that, or the caveat that even if a deaf person, they could be the most brilliant person in the world, or maybe, they didn't finish high school or what have you. But sometimes they're just not hearing the words that are on these papers very often. It's not common everyday language that they're having to read and sign and understand. Hard of hearing individuals, they may hear the word, but, in different contexts, it may sound differently or whatever, or they may think, okay, I think this is what I heard. And maybe they'll go back and look up what the meaning is or whatever. But you want to try to take away all of that doubt. You want it to be as clear as possible. So making sure that you're bringing in an interpreter or a captioner will make sure that that information is clear and as intelligible as possible. Oftentimes people will be like, well, I thought this is what this meant, or, oh, I think this is what they mean, so I'm just going to guess and put down an answer. It's, again, better to just take that guesswork out of there, make sure that there is no question what this person is reading and signing. The next question. Interpreters always provide the best access for someone who is deaf or hard of hearing. True or false? Correct. Everyone got that one right. True. True. And then the final question, how well a deaf or hard of hearing individual reads or writes English is a good indicator of their intelligence. True or false? Everyone got that one correct as well. That is a false statement. Yeah. Yeah, especially with all the papers that we're trying to fill out, just know it's not always the best indication of their understanding. So that is all for my part of the presentation. I would like to open it up to questions from anyone who may have them. So quiet. Question in the chat. Do we need a release of information for interpreters? So ROI is release of information, correct? This is Anthony. Yes. With each agency for everything, anytime you need to have the release of information for the agency umbrella or with the interpreters, yes, A to Z, still need to have that release. I will say that most of the time, it kind of gets confusing with the release of information. It's like, but who, what do they need to know, or what have you? But again, it's just that you have to just make sure that that interpreter is there and is able to get the information needed. So you should just have one on file for them, not every time they come into the appointment. It would be the similar concept to those of you who are responsible at the front desk. If you're giving them HIPAA compliance information or something, and you explain that each time they come in, then that would be similar for the interpreter. Is this ROI still valid? Mm-hmm. Okay, Amanda asked, should we get an interpreter if the client is a child and the parents can interpret for them? And the answer is no, you cannot let the parents interpret for the child. I have had to fight for myself just growing up, and then also with my own three children for communication access. I would never let my children interpret for me because, one, they're a child and they do not know medical vocabulary. They don't know how to spell these big, complicated words. How would they be able to interpret those concepts accurately for, adults? They have not gone through training or school, and we should not put those adult responsibilities on children. We need to utilize certified interpreters for any of that kind of communication that needs to happen. If it happens to you all that you have someone walk into the clinic and it's the hearing kid with their deaf parent, and they come to the front desk and they say, hey, tell me what they're saying, and you're just making an appointment, or if it's just, hey, can I get into the bathroom? Can you give me the key or something like that? Okay, that is a little bit different. That's just simple communication, but that's only okay until the interpreter arrives. Honestly, most appointments, you should have your interpreter arrive 15 minutes early ahead of time in order to pre-meet with anyone who needs to, whether it be the social worker, the nurse, or the doctor or whatever. And then that way the interpreter is already on site so that they can help with any paperwork that the person may need to be filling out. But do not put that onto the parents to have to rely on a minor in order to get their communication across. That should never, ever happen. And that also, honestly, just leads to childhood trauma. It's very uncomfortable for a child to learn that their parent could be viewed as helpless. There have been times that I have gone into an emergency department, for example, recently with my daughter, and it's an emergency situation. I understand it's an emergency. She's in the emergency department, but still try to do your best to reach out for an interpreter, to try to get someone. And at this time that I'm recalling specifically, there was no VRI, so I couldn't just call up somebody on my phone. But at least do what you can until the interpreter can show up to catch everyone up. But for doctor's appointments and counseling appointments, things like that that are scheduled ahead of time, there's really no excuse not to have an interpreter scheduled for those meetings. And again, never allow a child to interpret for their parents or for another adult. Other questions or comments?
I have a question, Sonia.
Okay.
Is it a, I guess, annoying for staff to write, to communicate when clients come in, as opposed to using, we have a tablet where we can access an interpreter via the tablet. Is it annoying for the client to write on pen, excuse me, on a pad of paper as opposed to using that system?
Honestly, like I mentioned earlier, most of the time, deaf and hard of hearing individuals do prefer communication in their own language. It would be something that you would have to ask that individual. Would they rather the VRI on the tablet, or would they rather have their writing, written back and forth? If you can just empower the deaf person to make that choice for themselves, what would be best for them, instead of making that choice for them and forcing them to use whatever you would rather, yeah, give that choice to the deaf individual who's there.
Noted.
Thank you. More questions or comments?
So I guess if there are no other questions, is there anything you would like to add, Mr. Atkins?
No, I think that I've covered everything. I will take the opportunity to emphasize um, what you've learned. Pass on to your coworkers or to other individuals if you see them, interacting with deaf individuals, or, like if you hear them saying, "How am I supposed to do this?" or "What am I supposed to do?" and "What is right?" Please just pass on the information that you have. Possibly share this training with them. Whatever you know, share. If you don't know the right answer, you can always contact us, contact me, and I will help you get the right answer.
Right. Thank you. I think this has been very eye-opening and educational for all of us that have many years of working a front desk. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. No problem. I appreciate that you guys have given your attention to this. I hope you all have a great afternoon and that you're able to use this information for your benefit.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.